we are going to try some stuff. I am hopefully set up to do a dry run on this little, let's see which way, yeah, right here. This little guy, he's known as Ferret-Badger, which I did not know existed until today, at least not that I remember. And we're going to do a little wash study of him, and I want to talk about how, in this session, to kind of go from the habit of drawing things really quick and having to cut out a lot of detail and information in order to be able to do that, to slowing down and seeing more. And that's enough words to begin with. So what I want to do is look at my little reference there and pick out what's interesting to me. What's interesting to me is the little dude. Do I want him to be, center of the frame, regardless of how he shows up in the reference? That's only for reference. It's not the God of me, so I don't have to, align myself to the outlines that are there, to the shape of the reference, the frame of it. Thank you. So, the little guy himself is going to be sort of like, and I'm just sort of drawing a really super quick envelope for him. Can you see what I'm drawing? Maybe. If I do a deep pencil, this will work better. We'll see. This is the top of his tail, going around the outside of his tail, and it curves into his rump and down his leg, and here's his foot about here, and then I'm going to zoom across to the base of his other leg where it hides behind that rock, foot. No, I think that's a dropping foot, up to the shoulder, and back to the top of the tail. Yeah, you can see that okay, I think. So, that took me, 30 seconds? Tops, I wasn't counting. So, now that I've got this envelope here, and I realize, oops, here's the perforation on my sketchbook page. Typical me. Gotta do that on camera, right? That kind of sets how big my envelope, my frame for him is going to be, because that's the absolute top of it right there. With that being the top, and not wanting to put a whole bunch of empty rock space below him, because that's not all that interesting, I'm going to give him about this much side to side, a little more on the bottom. So he's going to feel like he's a little bit higher than our point of view, because our point of view is going to be sort of right about here. So that's my rough frame for him now, and my very rough envelope for his body. Okay, having done that, I'm going to start cutting into that envelope that I did, sort of to refine this really rough mess that I've got here, so that his tail is flipped over like a squirrel tail, and you can see how the top of it, the end of it, ends up over his hip, and this is the base of it coming up from the back of his thigh here, and then he's got, it cuts in behind his knee, down to his hock, and then his leg is narrower than I have it there, but that gives about enough room for his little bear feet. I mean, like a bear. They have the coolest little feet. And then cuts up the thigh into now you can see the mass of his body is like right here, and his shoulders, I see I've made him a little too broad over here on my envelope, but this is just to give me a thing to correct. It's something to work against, which is all we're going to be doing here, is we're going to just kind of go at it big and then correct, refine until we end up where we want to end up. Okay, and then his head comes up and over, and his nose comes about 2/3 of the way through his tail, and is pointy and angled more or less so-ish down into these are his shoulders as he's facing his shoulders twisted forward towards us, and this front leg comes down and perches on the rock. Skinny little leg, chest fur, and just like most mammals, you know, we all have more or less the same anatomy. So if you have a cat or a dog, you know where its shoulders come down, and that point at the back that's at the top of the front leg, that's its elbow, you know. So it's the same with this little dude. Just the proportions are different, really. So we get down there, we can see this little foot, his toes are kind of tucked back behind the other foot. And then we can jump over here and go, okay, if this is his belly, oops, see here, I've made this part either two, let's see, if this goes up to under his jaw, and his nose is pointing there, so it comes to about here. If this comes up under his jaw, there's his ear, there's his other ear is like right above that. His body's curves up underneath the chest here, but I've got it a little too long here. So either this is not wide enough, or I got the whole thing messed up, which we may have to discover along the way. But I think this is that webbing between the top of the knee and the torso. So I'm going to just suggest that. You can see that his thigh comes down from his hip here, and then his calf, if you will, has this mass right here. And then his knee, which is more spread out than our knee, would be like your dog or your cat's knee, goes so. And then this is like the top of our foot, and these are his little toes. So that helps with that proportion. Still a little long before we get to that front leg. And I'm going to live with that for the moment. So then we have his furry back of that back leg, and it just disappears where the rock is, which is about here, and up behind his front leg. Okay, so we can take another stab at the tail. We're just going to suggest how it's all the heck over the place, and this is the actual meat of the tail comes down right about on top of his nose. The fur's all feather out there, and the little pink snoot there. And now you can see I'm getting into much tighter detail. And a lot of these envelope lines, like this one right here, you know, that's just filled in with fur. You can already see how we're you know, kind of discarding a lot of that envelope line with these details. And we're going to swoop up the head. His peaks at that ear, so the ear is actually a little higher than I had it, so that's good to know. And then it curves down the back of his head. His skull is probably right about here, but his spinal column, his neck is going to be going down here to his shoulder, and we can see that it curves out and kind of in and out, because here's the point of his far shoulder. And okay, now we can see we've made him super stocky over here. I think I made him too long this way. That's why I ended up with more space over here than I needed it. So we can just shrink them. We don't have to stick to anything that turns out to be wrong. What would be the point of that? So we're going to shrink him because we're seeing that that's incorrect. And then he has fur. Here's the square of his breastbone there. This leg is now too fat. And there's the throat wraps to about here. Sorry for any sounds. I don't know how to do all this stuff yet. If you could can hear those background noises. So now we can get into details like these patches of color that he's got and the shape of his cool ear, which is kind of like a mouse's ear. He's a member, as you might guess, of the weasel family, the mustelids. They're a big family. I've got weasels and stoats and badgers and skunks, otters, all kinds of fun animals in the mustelid group. Honey badgers, you may have heard of them. So now I'm going to edit this some because I got it too sort of flat and swoopy there, and then correct the nose to get it long enough and pointing in the right direction, and it kind of goes up a little bit more there. And I get a kick out of the little noses. I used to have a pet ferret, and I'm just having little ferret memories here. And then that little nose ball sticks off beyond his upper lip, his upper jaw. It's kind of just freestanding out there, so you can wiggle it into places. And his face is narrow, back to the jaw. And he has this little mask going on. A lot of the mustelids have an identifiable mask, a lot like the raccoons, which are a different group, which is kind of interesting because they've got that same, really identifiable mask thing going on, but they're two different families, I think? Yeah, I think it's families. Kind of an animal geek, in case that had escaped your attention to this one. So this is the around his eye. So I did the mask part so that I wouldn't get too big on the eye, because it's super easy to get eyes too big because we're all about eyes, humans, so okay, we got this little white, not white, but lighter green part here, and the fur is, now we can get to the things like, I'm starting to notice fur direction and how it flows from one place to another. So this is the kind of detail that you would not be able to get in your 30-second drawing unless you were a complete, absolute whiz-bang, which I sure don't pretend to be. I am a card-carrying member of the Snail Club. So that's where that's at. Correct the fuzz level here on his chest. Yeah, I'm liking this pretty well. I think his hip needs to be higher and swoopier at the back down to his thigh, because I can now see in proportion to everything else how that's not quite right. And then that connecting webbing and stuff that goes from there to the heel or hock. Yeah, and the hip bone would be in here, sort of ish, and then the back curves up, and then you can kind of see how the rib cage, there's some mass here from the rib cage, and he's twisted back on himself, so it's pinched back towards his hip. It would be further up if he were standing totally side on to us. Okay, so for this session, that's all I want to do, is kind of just lay in my sketch and show you a little bit about how getting something down is only the first step. Then you start observing more and more detail as the time goes on. And you correct against it. You correct against what you've already got down, and you just keep going with that. So that's enough for now. Okay? See you on the next one.